Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our guest Brett Andrus, Certified Athletic Administrator, Director of Athletics at Dugway High School. Welcome to the podcast, Brett.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience where you grew up, where you went to college, your first teaching job.
I grew up actually at the high school that I'm currently at Dugway High School here in Utah. I went to college started at Dixie, at the time junior college, and then finished at SUU with Dr. Lunt there.
So you're a product of the coaching factory, one of the many guests that have been on the podcast that have mentioned Steve Lunt. That's excellent. Where was your first job out of college then?
It was actually where I am. Coach George Bruce hired me right after my student teaching at Tooele High School.
Excellent. Tell me about any youth opportunities you had to play sports out in Dugway, because it's not a metropolitan area. So did you have to travel to Tooele, or did you not have as much opportunity as some of the other kids? Explain how that worked.
Yeah, so Dugway Proving Grounds is an Army base. We would have to travel to play everywhere to Delta and Tooele and Grantsville. We would travel to go play our youth sports, which included soccer and Little League and junior jazz basketball.
How many junior jazz teams were there at Dugway?
Yeah, we had, it depended on the year, but it was like one per age group. And sometimes we have two per age group.
You just had a little ways to travel to go then.
We did, yeah. We'd come into Tooele and Grantsville a lot.
Share with our audience some of the mentors you had in your life growing up and through college that helped you along the way.
Sure. So I remember, obviously it started with my dad. He was and is a sports fanatic. And so it really wasn't an option. I was going to be involved with sports. And coming up through high school, I distinctly remember we got a new football coach named Butch Bogler. And he came and brought with him like this really intricate offensive system that was new and crazy to us. And we were in practice, and some people were doing the routes wrong, receivers and stuff were doing the routes wrong. And he asked them what they were supposed to be running, and nobody knew. And I chimed in what each of them were supposed to do. And he just turned around, and it was a big moment in my life where he said, and that's why he's going to be a great coach.
Oh,
and from that moment on, I knew what I was going to do. And so that really inspired me. And then, of course, I played basketball under George Bruce. And then he hired me later on as well. So he was a big part of my life up through high school. And I was so fortunate to end up with Dr. Lunt, who would inspire me on a daily basis, and always reached out and always asked if I needed anything, and always, instilled in me that I was going to be successful in what I was doing. So.
Excellent. Do I dare ask, George Bruce certainly still isn't out there, is he?
So nope, he officially now retired 2 years ago. So, so I dedicated the gym to him in 2019. And so now our gymnasium is called the George Bruce Gymnasium.
That's awesome. And you probably also know this, we have that Hall of Fame basketball game every fall.
Yes.
We have the 1A, 2A girls and the 1A, 2A boys, and the 1A, 2A boys, the trophy is named the George Bruce Trophy.
100%.
named after a successful coach and athletic administrator. So
yeah,
that's excellent. Let me ask you this. What's your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
ooh, that's tough.
But it could be failure or disappointment. And what did you learn from it?
There's been many. Once I started coaching, we saw a lot of success early, and I got a team one year that we were rolling on pretty good, but fell short in our region standings, and so we got a tough draw in out at a state, and we went down there and we had to play Paiute, who at the time was, ranked number 3, and we weren't in the top 5, and we beat them, and man, we went into the locker room and we partied like it was the national championship. We were so excited because we just pulled off this big upset, and then the next day, I think we might have peaked too high, and rested on that great win that we had in the first round, and we ended up losing in the second round too. I think at the time it was Layton Christian when they were down in 1A, and it hurt. that hurt a lot, and I certainly learned from it a lot. To not lose focus on trying to get accomplished, and
sure.
So it was a tough one to swallow.
Let's have you talk about your background at the school before you became the AD, because you weren't the AD right when you got hired there.
Correct. Yeah. So when I first got there, Coach Bruce hired me, and our AD was another one of my former coaches, Coach Roberts, Carl Roberts. But him and his wife both taught there, and retired maybe 4 years after I got there. And about that time, George gave up the principal and just became the AD and driver's ed teacher. So, and there was one other lady, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge her, named Betsy Swinenberg,
Okay.
who served as kind of the girls AD while I was coaching the girls program, and she taught me so much, and she was wonderful.
When did you then become the athletic director? What year was that?
2008. George decided to move on from Dugway and retire, his first retirement.
His first retirement when he went to what? What's
Westridge.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, he went to Westridge for a few years, and at that time, my principal asked me to apply for it, and I wanted to make sure our athletics stayed intact, and so I did, and I got it there in 2008.
Let's talk for a moment about the job of athletic director, how it's changed even at a small school like yours, from when you took the job in 2008 to 14 years later in 2022. Talk about the big differences and what's changed.
So, and Hud said, I'm in a unique situation out at Dugway. So in 2008, we still had a good student population. We still offered most of the sports that 1A schools do. And so at the time, everything was paper, pencil, and forms and everything. So that's one big difference for me, at least, as far as travel requests and all of that stuff. For me, it's been adapting to the population decrease that's happened out at Dugway, and so some programs have been dropped. In order to keep some of the programs, we've had to be creative with transportation and arrange all of that stuff for our kids in order so they can participate. And so those are some of the challenges at a small school that we have to deal with.
Let's talk about your time serving on the UIAAA ADEC and how that's possibly changed your life or changed your outlook, or how it's possibly changed your region and some of the benefits that's happened to you that way.
100%. Yeah. So I'll start with the UIAAA. once I got in and I started, you know, obviously I was young and probably in over my head, you know, and then got encouraged to get down to that UIAAA conference down in St. George. And I learned so much that year. The law professor, he almost chased me out, you know, right off the bat.
Lee Green, yes.
Yeah. He almost chased me out right off the bat. But the being a part of the UIAAA is invaluable. And I preach it every time I come back to my regions, and anytime we get a new AD that I can talk to, because they always have a lot of questions. And the courses that the LTC courses that the UIAAA provide are the most valuable things that we can have. And so I learned a lot in taking, you know, the initial courses and the law courses and all of that. And then the ADEC was fantastic. And I think that's the most valuable and most the thing that I cherish the most is networking and being able to interact with all the different regions, especially the bigger schools, coincidentally enough, because it gives you a perspective, and some of the knowledge that you can get from them and networking with them can put things in perspective. It can help. It helped me be confident to the job that I needed to do at my school. So serving on ADEC is both an honor and a privilege, and I'm glad I was a part of it.
Let's have you speak about the importance of certification. And I talked to you because you are certified, have been certified since 2013. So you're not one of the newer people. You've been around the block. And talk about the journey that it took in 2013. And of course, we've had a big push here in Utah now to get everybody certified, but you're one of the forerunners, I guess you would, particularly at a smaller school, because you've had your certification for almost a decade.
Right. Yeah. You know, hey, look, I was fortunate enough to serve under, become the AD, and then have Clayton Carter, who's a long time certified and CMAA AD. And so, you know, he really pushed and encouraged. And so at the time, me and Luke Thomas, who was at Tintic High School, kind of went through the process together. And that was helpful because we could lean on each other. Look, I mean, we joked about Lee's law classes, but that's the type of stuff of getting certified that I think is the most important, to know exactly what the laws are, where changes have taken place each year. And that's all provided by doing that, and being able to keep all these balls up in the air that you have to do as an AD. And like I said, we all just kind of lean on each other and talk through all that stuff. And every year there's something new, right? Whether it's or something else, and we all get together in this union that we have, and we get through it. You know, we work through it all together, and I think that's the most important part of our community, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Let me ask you this, Brett. What's one common myth about being an athletic director that you would like to debunk?
that it's a cake job, you know, that oh yeah, you just go out there and, you know, you don't have much to do. It never stops. And so anybody that thinks that, you know, that they're gonna float through their career like by becoming an athletic director are wildly misled. It changes your life. I mean, there's always something to do, and there's always something to be concerned about, and there's always something coming that you need to be ahead of it. And so yeah, I think that's the biggest myth.
As an athletic director, what's the favorite part of your job?
The kids. The kids at 100%. You know, you grow and I'm in a small school, so I know these kids intimately, and that's my fight. That's my fight that I'm having at Dugway right now, is that I want to provide these extracurricular activities because I know how important they are and I know how much the kids want them. But it becomes tough when the population keeps going down to fill like a baseball program that needs at least 9 on the field and a couple to make those subs. Sure. And when I first got there, man, it wasn't a problem. We had students all over the place, and now as the base is downsizing and all of that stuff, it becomes I'm as much an athletic recruiter as I am an AD because I got to get out there and I've got to preach the importance of it, not only to the students but to the parents, so they want to be so they're on board and encourage their children to participate. So,
what's the current population at Dugway? Round numbers
for the school.
For the school,
9 through 12, we're just under 50.
And in the better days, how big was the population?
So when I graduated, my graduating class was 33. When I came back to teach, it was right around 25 to 28. Okay,
so you maybe had upwards of 100, and having 100 kids in the school is a lot different than having 50.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, let's finish up with a couple of questions, Brett. The first being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new AD. They need to follow these suggestions in order to be successful. What would your 2 suggestions to that new AD be?
First and foremost is to to join the UIAAA and get down to that convention, because the networking down there will definitely help you, and you'll find really quick that everybody's willing to help. Everybody wants you to be successful, and everybody within the athletic director community will make themselves available to help you. 2, I would say to get certified, but more importantly, I think that know the commitment that you're making. Know the time that you're going to have to put in, and that it doesn't end. Even when we're down at that convention, Hutch, and you know this, there's always right in the middle of a session, 2 or 3 people will pop up within that hour to go and answer a phone and deal with a crisis or whatever. And so I would just say know about the commitment that you're about to embark on.
Well, and it's a little, I laugh about that. The year we had the COVID and we moved the conference to August and had it here in Salt Lake, it was the worst because it was the week before football started. It was everybody's Friday night inter-squad game. And as many people that step out in St. George, it seemed like 80% of the people are stepping in and out or running back to school, which is one of the advantages of having it in St. George, where you're there and say, hey, this is what you got. So someone there is going to have to deal with it. So thanks for pointing out. Those are great points. Let's finish with this, Brett. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
Oh, wow. Maybe about the dynamic of being on a military base.
Well, let's talk. We got some time, so let's talk about how you're different than Tintic or different than Wendover or any of the others. Well, different from the private schools because you're on the military base, and so that makes it different. Right. So go ahead and share with that.
Well, with being on a military base, there's always been a little dynamic in that when we have home games, teams and parents have to travel through and get through on a gate. And so depending on the commander at the time, because they go through every 2 years, they get a new commander. And whatever their regulations are, then I need to pass that on to the visiting teams and the visiting parents and fans. I don't think there's a better example than the COVID, the pandemic year. We went into that year not knowing if we were even going to be able to have in-person class, much less athletics. So there was a lot to deal with there in communicating with the base and trying to find that out. And for me, finding alternate locations to, if we were going online, alternate locations to have our home games, in here at Tooele, talking with Catham and Travis and Scott and, in here. as it turned out, we were able to have games, but they wouldn't allow any visiting and stuff. So my point being, I guess, is that, when we were going through the pandemic, I had to follow the state's regulations. I had to follow my district's regulations. And then I also had to comply with the base regulations. And so that's the example that I would give of the dynamic, but there's always a little something that, because we always have to follow, the base comes first, right? And so anything after that, we just have to adjust. So
let me follow up. So have you ever had to move games from the base during your time there for whatever reason, be pandemic or otherwise?
Yeah, so that pandemic year, we ended up having volleyball at home, but we did end up using Catham Beer's field at Tooele High School, because the base kind of shut down, right, during the pandemic, including maintenance and all of that stuff. And so our home baseball field is actually the possession of Dugway Proving Grounds, and there wasn't any workers out there all summer, and our field got to be unplayable. And so we ended up practicing on it, but we did our home games here at Tooele High School.
Okay. Well, that's something I didn't know about the base. So thank you for sharing. That wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Brett Andrus, Certified Athletic Administrator, the Director of Athletics at Dugway High School. Brett, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.